Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm going to carry on with Matthew chapter 13, the parable of the sower, verse 1. That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them in parables, saying, A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places, where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly, because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown. He who has ears, let him hear. So, the idea of the farmer sowing these seeds, number one, it talks about how God has sown his seeds, which is us Christians, into the world among all these thorns and all these things, and we have to deal with all these different struggles. But those of us that are planted on good soil, we've got a good strong faith, we endure the hardships. It also means we should be going out sowing seeds as often as we can, spreading the word wherever we have the opportunity, and not worry too much about the outcome. Just do what you can to sow the seeds. Let God deal with how much of an impact that has, where the message goes, how it's perceived, all that kind of stuff. Just do your best to spread seeds, and don't be so outcome dependent on what happens with it. The disciples came to him and asked, Why do you speak to the people in parables? He replied, The knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has been given more will have an abundance. Whoever has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. This is why I speak in parables. Though seeing they do not see, though hearing they do not hear or understand. So, a good litmus test for a teacher is whether or not they can understand these parables. So, if to you it seems like I don't understand these parables, then you should not continue to listen to me. If it seems like I do, then it means that I have and I will be and am being given more, and then you should listen to me. And you can use that wherever you go, whatever church you're attending, whatever Bible study teacher you're listening to, or anything like that. They're the litmus test of whether or not someone has a decent understanding is in the parables. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing but never understanding. You will be ever seeing but never perceiving. For the people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. So this is also saying that Jesus is basically saying he could speak in such a way that would convince everyone, but he respects his free will. So he only allows things to be revealed to those that he knows want to hear it. He speaks kind of in a little bit of a coded message so that those who don't want to believe won't be so convinced that it basically overrides their free will. That's why he makes things a little bit indirect and why he speaks in these parables. So in other words, if someone does not understand the parables, it is because they do not want to believe the message. Tough but true. But verse 16, But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For I tell you the truth, many prophets and righteous men longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in his heart. See, this is the seed sown along the path. The one who received the seed that fell on rocky places is the man who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since he has no root, he lasts only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, he quickly falls away. The one who received that seed fell among the thorns. The one who received that seed that fell among the thorns is the one who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful. But the one who received the seed that fell on good soil is the man who hears the word and understands it. He produces a crop, yielding 160 or 30 times what is sown. Verse 24, Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvester, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." So Jesus is talking about how God sowed the good seeds, that's us believers, and Satan has sown bad seeds, these thorns. And we don't want to go around, remember, don't judge or you will be judged in the same way. We don't want to judge who is the good and bad bushes and things like that at this time, because we may uproot some good believers in the process of doing so. Instead, we're just supposed to wait, because Jesus will eventually come back and sort out the believers and the unbelievers. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't have discernment about what teachers you're listening to, but that you don't want to go around trying to decide who is and who is not saved, because that's something that only God can know. Only God really understands a man's heart and whether or not he truly has accepted Jesus as their Savior. The parables of the mustard seed in the east, verse 31. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all your seeds, when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and perch in its branches. In other words, even the smallest little start of your faith can do something amazing. Just the littlest acceptance of Jesus can build you into an amazingly strong believer, have a great walk in the Lord, all kinds of amazing things. And it just starts with the smallest little first step. That's all you've got to take for Jesus. He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into a large amount of flour until it worked through all the dough. Again, it only takes a little bit of a start for this stuff to grow. Once there's some sort of entry point for God, he can come in and move in incredible ways. You just got to open the door for him. Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. Verse 36. Then he left the crowd and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels." So that makes it really clear, really plain and clear. And notice as well, it's always referring to sons. This stuff is, we'll see this more and more, but these messages are really specifically targeted towards men. And we'll get to what role women have here, but this stuff, the parables, all those types of obedience and everything, this pertains to men and is speaking to men. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of this age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out his kingdom and everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. When the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let them hear. So, Another tough but very true message is, at the end of the age, which we're getting very close to, the sorting out of who is going to heaven and hell is going to be handled by angels. Which is really nice, because that means we don't have to worry about it. We can just keep scattering seeds as best as we can, wait until the sorting comes at the end. We'll get to when that is, but it is very soon. The parables of the hidden treasure and the pearl. Verse 44. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy he went and sold all he had and bought the field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. This is basically just talking about how much Jesus really loves us. That we are his treasure. We are the most valuable thing in the world to him. And when he wanted to go out and get us, he gave up everything for it, as he did in his life on the cross, and as we'll see in the future, where he hands down and we inherit the kingdom. He willingly gave everything just to have a relationship with us. Verse 47, once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up onto the shore. They sat down and collected the good fish in baskets and threw the bad away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So again, we're still in the net. We haven't reached the end of the age where everything's been sorted yet. There's good fish and bad fish. It's not for us to judge. We're just supposed to wait, kind of have to deal with it for now, but eventually it'll all be sorted out, and it'll be perfect. Nobody will end up in the wrong place, rest assured. Have you understood all these things? Jesus asked. Yes, they replied. He said to them, therefore every teacher of the law who has been instructed about the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storerooms new treasures as well as old. Oh, that's a short one. So basically what that means is those that are teaching this stuff can understand the treasures of old that are in here, and also the new treasures that we see in the world coming out. Which speaks to the fact that God is continuously moving. He isn't done. He has not gone silent. He is resting because it is finished, right? But that the Spirit is still moving, people are still getting saved, the kingdom is still growing, even though his work in that way is done. Verse 53, when Jesus had finished these parables, he moved from there. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? They asked. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? That's funny, that's my mom's name. And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all of these things? And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, only in his hometown and in his own house is a prophet without honor. And he did not do any miracles there because of their lack of faith. So again, back at I had mentioned in the beginning of Matthew chapter 1 about how important our family ancestry is, and moving back to your ancestral roots and digging into all that. We see again here, prophets have no honor in their hometown. You've got to move away from where you grew up to really be empowered in ministry. I can attest to that in my own life. As I moved back out here to my home country, which is Germany, it's finally really enabled me spiritually to be able to teach these messages and things like that. Was not able to do that in my hometown. really in and most especially back in California, but really pretty much anywhere I went, it just didn't sit right. It didn't click. But moving out of that and moving into my own new place, really getting away from my hometown has brought a whole new chapter in my life. I really can't encourage that highly enough. It's a tough thing to do, but it is absolutely worth it, especially if you want to be able to be as fruitful as you can for God. We see over and over, it's a clear message of separating from the parents, moving away from your hometown, and following the Lord in whatever He's calling you to. Chapter 14, verse 1. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard the reports about Jesus, and he said to his attendants, "This is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. That is why miraculous powers are at work in him." Now Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, for John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of the people because they considered him a prophet. So John the Baptist had called out a Herodias, I think it is, for having an immoral marriage, and as a result found himself in prison, and as a result got himself beheaded. And now Herod is thinking that Jesus is John reincarnated. This isn't correct, of course, but that's what's going on here. On Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for them and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist." The king was distressed, but because of his oaths and his dinner guests, he ordered that her request be granted, and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought to John on a platter and given to the girl, who carried it to her mother. John's disciples came and took his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus. So all the wrong stuff that we could do is going on here, and not all of it, but Herod's at a party. Things aren't people aren't acting the way they should. Herod gets seduced by this girl. Herod makes an oath, and the whole thing just gets him in a whole bunch of trouble, and he ends up beheading John the Baptist. So stay away from parties. Don't make oaths. Jesus feeds the 5,000, verse 13. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing this, all the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said, and he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So first of all, just because you don't think you have enough resources to do whatever God's calling you to, just trust him. You'll have enough. And also, really neat here, it says the number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. The women and children are not counted here. They do not count in these teachings. These teachings are for men specifically. Now, women, that means that you have to be very wise in selecting a man who understands these things and can lead you properly in Christ. But you don't have the same responsibility in following these things as men do. Your responsibility is just to submit to your husband, obey and follow your husband, as we'll see later on. But these messages and all the stuff that's being spoken about is speaking directly to men exclusively. Jesus walks on the water, verse 22. Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking out on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. It was weird because they've been with Jesus for a while, but for some reason they don't recognize him here. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come out onto the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said, "why do you doubt?" And this happens to us all the time. We see Jesus, we get excited, we go out walking with him, and then it gets a little rough, things get a little scary, we start to sink. It happens, and Jesus catches us. Don't worry about it. And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Verse 32. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized Jesus, they sent word to all the surrounding country. People brought all their sick to him and begged him to let their sick just touch the edge of his cloak, and all of whom touched him were healed. And again, we saw that earlier with the woman who was bleeding, who touched his cloak and was healed. That's not right theology, but it doesn't matter. It's the faith that heals us. So even if you're getting things wrong, don't worry about it. Jesus has got you. Chapter 15. Then some of the Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat." Again, the teachers getting all caught up on legalism. Jesus replied, verse 3, "And why do you break the command of God for the sake of your tradition? For God said, 'Honor your father and mother,' and anyone who curses his father or mother must be put to death. But you say that if a man says to his father or mother, 'Whatever help you might otherwise have received from me is a gift devoted to God,' he is not to honor his father with it. Thus you nullify the word of God for the sake of your tradition. You hypocrites, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are but rules taught by men." What Jesus is talking about here is, in Jewish tradition, you could basically dedicate something to the Lord, and then at that point you couldn't give it away. So sometimes some of these men, what they would do is when their parents needed something, they would just say, "Oh well, everything that I have is dedicated to the Lord, so you can't have anything." And it was a way of using legalism to get around being loving and taking care of their parents and honoring them as they should. Jesus called the crowd to him and said, "Listen and understand. What goes into a man's mouth does not make him unclean, but what comes out of his mouth, that is what makes him unclean." So, very plain, whatever you eat, whether it's dirty, whether people think that it's the wrong kind of food, whatever you eat does not defile you, no matter what it is. And I would go so far. Well, you can basically do that with pretty much anything, but what comes out of your mouth really defiles you. What you say really matters. Then the disciples came to him and asked, "Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this?" He replied, "Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots. Leave them, they are blind guides. If a blind man leads a blind man, both will fall into a pit." So again, not worrying about those that are not planted by God, those that are not going to be harvested and called up to God, and to be very careful of your leaders, because if you're following a blind leader, they could lead you into a pit, and neither of you would know it. Peter said, "Explain the parable to us." Are you still so dull? Jesus asked them. Verse 17. Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of the mouth come from the heart, and these make a man unclean. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what make a man unclean, but eating with unwashed hands does not make him unclean. So we all have all kinds of sinful thoughts, and we want to say all kinds of bad things. Keep it inside. Don't let it come out. Don't worry when you stumble in that. It's a hard thing to deal with because this world can really irritate us and really make us say all kinds of things that we ought not to. It'll happen, but be very careful with it and work on it. And it gets easier and better with time. The more you practice these things, the easier it becomes to obey these commands of love that Jesus gives us. The faith of the Canaanite woman, verse 21. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman in the vicinity came to him, crying out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is suffering terribly from demon possession. Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us. He answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. The woman came and knelt before him. Lord, help me, she said. He replied, It is not right for me to take the children's bread and toss it to their dogs. Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Jesus answered, Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And her daughter was healed from that very hour. So Jesus doesn't answer at first, which is a little weird, right? But he knew that this woman had great faith and would persist, so he's using her as an example of that. And what he's talking about here, he's relating her, using him metaphorically, referring to her as a dog and saying, I've come for the Jews. It's not right to take the bread that was meant for, well, the kids in the example, and to give it to the dogs, which is losing the word here. A Gentile. There we go. So, but she's acknowledging that. She's saying, she's basically acknowledging and saying, yes, I understand that I'm a Gentile. I'm a dog in this perspective, but even the dogs get crumbs. Even though Jesus has come to save the Jews, the Gentiles get some of that as well. And Jesus was very impressed by her recognizing that she is not that she's not a Jew, yet she is, if you will, entitled to some salvation as well. And that's the great thing about us, is to understand that includes all of us. I myself, in this example, I'm a dog, but I get some of the crumbs that come along from Jesus coming to save the Jews. Jesus feeds the 4,000, verse 29. Jesus left there and went along the Sea of Galilee. Then he went up on a mountainside and sat down. Great crowds came to him, bringing the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others, and laid them at his feet, and he healed them. The people were amazed when they saw the mute speaking, the crippled made well, and the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they praised the God of Israel. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me for 3 days and have nothing to eat. I do not want to send them away hungry, or they may collapse on the way. His disciple answered, Where could we get enough bread to this remote place to feed such a crowd? He just fed 5,000 people not long ago. This was probably a few months past or so, not particularly important. The point is, the disciples already forgot that he just fed 5,000, and now they're worried about him being able to feed 4,000. They're already having doubt again. It's funny. Verse 34, How many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. 7, they replied, and a few small fish. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. Then he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and when he had given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and they in turn to the people. They all ate and were satisfied. The original word, by the way, here, satisfied, basically means like gluttoned, like they were stuffed. Afterward, the disciples picked up the 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was 4,000, besides women and children. Again, it's 4,000 men, besides women and children. The women and children don't count. They're not counted in these teachings. He's talking to the men. After Jesus had sent the crowd away, he got into the boat and went into the vicinity of Magadan. Chapter 16. The Pharisees and Sadducees came to Jesus and tested him by asking him to show them a sign from heaven. He replied, "When evening comes, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, today it will be stormy, for the sky is red and overcast. You who know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but cannot interpret the signs of the times. The wicked and adulterous generation looks for a miraculous sign, but none will be given it except the sign of Jonah." Jesus then left them and went away. So a couple of things are going on here. First of all, these Pharisees and Sadducees are just never satisfied with what's going on. And second of all, also, Jesus is pointing out to them that we ought to be looking to the skies, to the sun, the moon, and the stars, for signs of the times. They, again, that's not astrology. That's not your Pisces and your Sagittarius, but that's understanding constellations, right? The star that appeared over Bethlehem when Jesus was born, things like that. Verse 5. When they went across the lake, the disciples forgot to take bread. "Be careful," Jesus said to them. "Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees." They discussed this among themselves and said, "It is because we didn't bring any bread." Aware of the discussion, Jesus asked, "You have little faith, why are you talking among yourselves about having no bread? Do you still not understand? Don't you remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many basketfuls you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000 and how many basketfuls you gathered? How is it you don't understand that I was not talking to you about bread? But be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." Then they understood that he was not telling them to guard against the yeast used in bread, but to guard against the teachings of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Again, be very careful about the teachings of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. We still have that today. That comes in within Christianity, and that is absolutely coming out of seminary school. That is our Christian equivalent of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The educational structure about the Bible, external Bible teachings, and legalism. Verse 13. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea and Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do we say the Son of Man is? Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven." So again, if you can understand that Jesus is the Son of God, it's not your own understanding or any teaching that you received that allowed you to understand that. It's God himself opening your mind to that. It is a supernatural ability. It is a spiritual calling to be able to understand that Jesus is the Son of God. "And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." He warned his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. So he's speaking directly to Peter here, but this also means to us that we will get the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and the things that we bind and loose here on earth, there's an equivalent that goes on up in heaven. Now, we won't fully understand that until we get there, but it does in many ways mean things along the lines of the relationships that we bind and loose, or most especially one that really hit me was marriage. If you marry someone on earth, there's a parallel that happens to that in heaven. If you get divorced down here on earth, there's a parallel up in heaven. You're not going to be bound back to one another. There's a cohesion between what we bind and loose here and what we bind and loose up in heaven. We won't know exactly how all that works out, but it means that whether you've gotten married or divorced, don't worry, that's not going to change when we get upstairs. We don't know what that's all going to look like, but if you're divorced like myself and you're worried about like, oh no, what's gone through that stage of worrying about what's that going to mean up in heaven? Does God honor that? Whatever. If we decide to loose that, that is loosed. Verse 21, Jesus predicts his death. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Never, Lord," he said, "this shall never happen to you." Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." Kind of a tough one there, where he's calling one of his disciples Satan. Hard to say exactly what's going on there, because that's almost certainly some sort of spiritual warfare going on. But that Jesus here is part of what Jesus is getting at here is that he has to go die on the cross in order to be able to defeat Satan, because he has to experience death in order to be able to defeat death once and for all. And it would be in Satan's benefit if he had not gone to the cross. Verse 24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. So, take up your cross here. Let's just apply that real literally. Literally take up your cross. I got mine right there. Carry it on my little bracelet. Carry a cross with you in some form or another. Just apply that literally. A simple, easy, and a great little way to have the opportunity to spread little mustard seeds. And for he wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. Really don't worry about what's going on in this world. Be ready to leave lots of things behind. As we've seen in previous chapters about Jesus has nowhere to lay his head. Don't hang on to your material possessions. They can and oftentimes will get in the way of being as truly fruitful and reaching the full potential that God has for you. Verse 26. What good will it be for a man if he gains the whole world yet forfeits his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? Again, this is really about keeping your mind and heart focused on what's coming ahead, about Jesus coming back, heaven, and trying as best as you can to let go of the outcomes of this world and stay focused on that. Because again, what's 80 years in the face of a billion or a trillion or infinite? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what he has done. And what he has done here is referring to just the good things that you've done. We'll get to this, I believe, more later. Yeah. But the bad stuff that you've done, that's already been judged and taken care of. Don't worry about that. Jesus already took all the punishment for all the bad things that we have done, are doing, and will do in the future. But we are going to get rewarded for all the good things that we do. All the times we share the gospel, all the times we love one another, all the times we're kind, all the time we give a cup of cold water to someone. That all gets rewarded. We will not lose that. I tell you the truth, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And that was true, not fully, not the full big millennial kingdom thing, but in terms of seeing Jesus die and brought back to life. He's referring to that in a kind of parable type of way, and they did indeed see that. Chapter 17. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah, talking with Jesus. So this verse here gives a lot of people the idea, the speculation that Moses and Elijah are the two prophets that come during the tribulation. We know that Elijah is one, and so it would make sense then that Moses is. Interesting speculation. We'll kind of dig into that more as we go. It's not entirely important, and certainly not applicable. But his face shining like the sun and his clothes becoming white is a little bit of a glimpse of what we're going to be like when it says that when we see Jesus, we will become like him. Verse 4, Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down on the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." When they looked up, and they saw no one except Jesus. So this is just another thing that highlights that Jesus is the Son of God. It's not Moses or Elijah or anyone else. And that he is totally set apart. He is not to be held equal with anyone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus instructed them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The disciples asked him, "Why then do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus replied, "To be sure, Elijah comes and will restore all things. But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but have done to him everything that they wished. In the same way, the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands." Then the disciples understood that he was talking to them about John the Baptist. So, John the Baptist is Elijah. When they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. "Lord, have mercy on my son," he said. "He has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him." "O unbelieving and perverse generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me." Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed from that torment. So whatever is going on here looks a lot like a mental, like what we would in modern days call some sort of mental disorder, and we see that it's demonic possession. And I am personally convinced that there is a strong correlation to many of these mental health issues that we see and demonic possession. I am not convinced that they are plainly medical. That's not to say, well, I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you how to navigate those things, but that there is something demonic that is going on with mental health issues. Then the disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "Because you have so little faith. I tell you the truth, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." We underestimate how much we can do with our faith, and we also don't understand how much faith we do and do not have. Because I have tried to tell mountains to move, and I'm very bewildered by the fact that it hasn't worked, but I'm going to keep trying. Anyways, verse 22. When they came together in Galilee, he said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and on the 3rd day he will be raised to life." And the disciples were filled with grief. Verse 24. After Jesus and his disciples arrived in Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma tax came to Peter and asked, "Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax?" "Yes, he does," Peter replied. Then, when Peter came into the house, Jesus was the first to speak. "What do you think, Simon?" he asked. "From whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their sons or from others?" "From others," Peter answered. "The sons are exempt," Jesus said to him. "But so that we may not offend them, go to the lake and throw out your line. Take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4 drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and yours." Jesus pays his taxes, as we all have to, unfortunately. But just a simple fact of life, Jesus didn't fight against it, and we ought not to either. Anyways, we'll go ahead and end that here for now, starting off at chapter 18 next. Thanks so much, guys. God bless. See you again soon.